Episode 4, The Room with No Answers. 2 more weeks passed. No response. Amara had officially made it out of her first trimester, and yet she felt more alone than ever. She still sent messages, written like diary entries in the quietest hours of dawn or the stillest moments of night. She wanted Dohwan to have the full picture, that she didn't make the decision to keep the baby lightly, that she had hoped it would be something they chose together. But she heard nothing. Each message remained unread. She decided to stay in Korea. She wanted her baby to know its roots, even if Dohwan wouldn't be a part of it. A lesson in forgiveness. Her heart was full, too full, and she had no one to talk to. But at least the morning sickness had passed. She was sleeping better. She could finally make flower deliveries without feeling like she'd collapse between stops. She'd made it to the 4th month. Sometimes the need for rest still overtook her, but the staff at the florist never complained. Maybe they felt sorry for her. Maybe they knew that her ex had ghosted her, that she was trying to move on without the father of her child. One evening she was assigned a delivery to a renowned hospital, VIP Suites. She waited at the reception desk, but the nurses were occupied with other patients. Eventually she was allowed up. The card on the flowers read, "To Grace." The note wished her well and offered sincerest sympathies. Room 1803. The name on the door, Kwon, Grace Lee. Amara knocked softly. No response. She knocked again, then cautiously let herself in. The room was beautiful. Rich wood panels, upholstered chairs, a low sofa, a sweeping view of the city below. In the bed, a woman lay motionless. Had she been awake, she would have seen the twinkle of the tea lights in the windows. Amara replaced the arrangement on the bedside table. Pale orange tulips, green fern fronds, eucalyptus. Then, respectfully, she removed the old arrangement and stepped outside to discard it. A janitor's cart sat nearby, but something made her turn back. She looked again, closer. The figure in the bed looked familiar. Amara stepped forward and froze. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh no," she whispered. "Grace, oh my God. Grace." She said the name aloud. Her voice cracked. Tubes, beeping machines, the stillness of the room. Grace looked fragile in a way Amara had never imagined. She and Grace had never been friends, but something about seeing her like this made Amara's heart splinter. A wedding band glittered on Grace's finger. That hit hardest of all. Amara wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay. Her phone buzzed, a message from the driver, delayed downstairs with a funeral delivery. "Take your time," he said. "I've got the keys." So Amara stayed. 10 minutes. Watching, whispering Grace's name, afraid to speak too loudly. She barely noticed when a nurse finally entered. The nurse startled. "What are you doing here, Uya?" Amara straightened. "I'm with the florist," she said softly. "I'm Amara." "You shouldn't be here. You're disturbing the patient. I have to ask you to leave." "Please," Amara said. "I know her. I haven't disturbed her. I didn't expect to find her like this. I just need a few more minutes." Something in her voice cracked. The nurse paused. "How long has she been here?" Amara asked. The nurse sighed. "A month ago, her car was hit by an industrial truck. Her husband walked away. She didn't. The cause was brake failure. It was in the news." Amara blinked. I thought Dohwan had married her." Amara mumbled to herself. The nurse hesitated. The missus is young. She has a good chance. But that's all I'm allowed to say. I'll give you a few minutes more." When she left, Amara moved to Grace's side and gently took her hand. Tears pooled instantly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You're a fighter, Grace. I know you don't like me, and that's okay, but I've seen your fire." Her voice trembled. "Please get better, for yourself, for your family, for everyone who's waiting for you to come back." One of the monitors beeped suddenly, faint but new. The nurse rushed in. "What happened?" Amara stepped back. "Nothing. I was just talking to her." The nurse scanned the vitals. "You should go. I'm calling the doctor." Amara wiped her face. "Good night, Grace. I'll be praying for your healing." And with that, she stepped quietly out of the room. For 3 weeks now, deliveries had been arriving regularly at the hospital, always addressed to Grace. This time, the usual driver was unavailable, and Amara volunteered to take the small bouquet herself. She told herself it wasn't a big deal, just a drop-off. She stopped at the nurse's station. Same nurse from the last time. Amara was planning to leave the bouquet there, avoid the suite entirely, but then she overheard something. Grace's husband was with her. Amara's heart stuttered. She wasn't ready, not to see him, not now, especially after the unread texts, especially after all that had gone unsaid. "I'll leave these with you," Amara said, trying to keep her voice light. "Please just sign here." The nurse signed, then looked up. "Her husband asked that you deliver these personally." Amara blinked. "What?" "He said you'd know what they're for, and he doesn't take no for an answer." That stopped Amara cold, but she nodded. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't even De Juan. Maybe it was someone else. Still, her pulse raced. "Please don't disturb her husband," the nurse added. "He's been here non-stop. It's likely he's resting." Amara knocked gently and slipped inside. The suite was quiet, dimly lit. She placed the arrangement beside the still fresh bouquet from last time and leaned toward the bed. "Hi, Grace," she whispered. "I'm back. I know, you can't believe it either." She reached for Grace's hand and smiled. "I'd talk louder, but your husband's resting somewhere in here. I saw his shoes. He must be napping." The shoes, barely visible from the shadowed corner, were the only sign of him. If not for the soft toe caps peeking out, she wouldn't have known anyone else was in the room. She tried to focus. "Okay, let's talk. French fries, McDonald's, or the other guys. Personally, I'm a Mickey D's girl, but I need to know why they're never hot." She giggled softly to herself. "I've seen your figure, Grace. You look snatched, so I know you're not eating fries like me." Amara kept talking. For 30 minutes, she filled the silence with girl talk, random thoughts, and soft encouragements. It helped, being there. She almost forgot her nerves. Eventually, she stood. "All right, young lady, I should go." Amara gave Grace's hand a final squeeze. "I cannot wait to hear your take on that skincare line, but I'm telling you, they changed the formula. Okay, remember, you're strong, you're fierce, and I can't wait to hear your voice again." Then, beep, not the heart monitor, the other one. Amara glanced at it. "Are you okay, honey? What can I do?" "Okay, I'll get the nurse." Just as she moved, the nurse and doctor entered. "Doctor, we're seeing more brain activity again," the nurse said. "Just like earlier this week." Amara froze. "Is she okay? Did I do something wrong?" The doctor's tone was firm. "Mrs., what were you doing prior to the alert?" Amara blinked. "Nothing, I was talking to her. We have an agreement. She listens. I ramble." "We need to know what you're doing exactly," he said. "This isn't coincidence. The monitor only changes when you're here." Amara's eyes widened. "No, I haven't done anything." "Are you saying she responds to your dialogue?" "No, sir. I just mean, I talk, I hold her hand, that's all." The moment turned cold. She could feel the tension shift. "I think I should leave," Amara said softly. She gathered her bag and turned to go before the doctor could stop her. As she walked toward the elevators, she didn't notice Jaemin watching. He followed her out of the room but stopped down the hall. He'd come around the corner just in time to see her. He didn't call out, didn't follow, but something about the man who had watched her, frozen and hiding in plain sight, didn't sit well with Jaemin. He stayed there a moment longer, eyes scanning the corridor. Then reluctantly, he let it go. Unbeknownst to Amara, Jaemin had been in Grace's hospital room on more than one occasion during her visits. He became a quiet presence, slipping in and out of the background, making it his habit to listen. To the staff, the nurses, the visitors, and what he heard shook him. It wasn't just the cold efficiency of doctors giving updates or nurses noting brain activity. It was the way people spoke about Grace when they thought she couldn't hear. He'd once believed she was deeply loved by her circle, friends, colleagues, even her fashion world contacts. But now, hearing their voices, thoughts unguarded, Jaemin realized how few of them spoke with affection. He heard whispered criticisms from women who used to pose, smiling beside her in Instagram posts, snide remarks about her body, her spending habits. One person joked that Grace had faked a coma to avoid facing a PR scandal. Another laughed about how she'd stolen designs from an up-and-coming assistant. And then there were the visits from Julian Baker. Loud, entitled, familiar. The man would arrive in head-to-toe designer, reeking of ego and cologne. He'd sit at Grace's bedside and talk to her as if she were merely resting. "Still giving everyone the performance of your life, darling?" he said once, before muttering under his breath. "You were always better unconscious." Jaemin had stood frozen on the other side of the curtain, fists clenched. That was the day he stopped making excuses for her. The woman he married, the woman he planned a family with, was someone else entirely. Their life together had been built on a lie. Grace had faked her pregnancy. Jaemin had learned the night of the accident. She'd told him they were having a boy. 4 months along. He'd rearranged his entire life to be home with her and the baby. The cravings, the mood swings, the ultrasound photos. All of it had felt so real. But at the hospital, after begging the doctors to double-check, they showed him the truth. The prosthetic bump she wore had been sealed in a plastic evidence bag with her other belongings. The OB/GYN's notes confirmed it. No pregnancy. Not even a miscarriage. Just a fabrication. Even then, Jaemin tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she'd miscarried early. Maybe she couldn't tell him. But deep down, he knew the truth. The betrayal ran deep. Divorce papers were drawn. But the wound was still open. He prayed daily for Grace to wake up, just to ask her why. Why lie? Why humiliate him like this? Eventually, his grief turned to suspicion. He installed security cameras in her room. Was the coma real, or just another mask? Then Amara entered their lives. At first, Jaemin barely registered her, a flower delivery girl. But as the days passed, he began watching the footage. Amara kept returning. Not just delivering flowers, but sitting and talking with Grace. Sometimes reading, sometimes venting, sometimes just holding her hand. And curiously, something in Grace responded. Subtle spikes in brain activity. Jaemin reviewed the footage like a man unraveling a code. He marked the timestamps, tracked what Amara said, how she talked about her loneliness, her small joys, her memories of Grace from the past. She told stories about work, about school, about how her boss was nice to her. Jaemin watched her laugh, watched her cry. Sometimes she brought small gifts, familiar scented lotion, a book she hoped Grace would love. And every time Grace's monitors flickered ever so slightly. The part that haunted Jaemin most was how genuine Amara seemed, and how undeserving Grace now felt in comparison. He paused and replayed those clips often, not because he was falling for Amara, but because she reminded him of the life he thought he had with Grace. She made Grace seem more human, more reachable, and that made it harder to let go. Amara had stayed away from the hospital for an entire week. Something about Grace's slow progress unsettled her, and guilt gnawed at the idea that she might have contributed to it. Still, she missed Grace deeply. Grace was her last connection to De Juan. Amara hadn't told Grace she was pregnant, not out of shame, but fear. By the 6th month, though, she knew it was time. If De Juan couldn't face her, then maybe Grace could be the bridge. So Amara sent a message. "I have something to tell you." She hoped he'd respond, hoped he'd want to know. There was no reply. That day, a prenatal appointment had unexpectedly rerouted Amara to the hospital instead of her usual birthing center. Afterward, unable to resist, she made her way to Grace's room. The nurses greeted her warmly. Grace's visitor list had grown sparse, just a trickle of family now. Amara noticed the men's shoes weren't there, which brought a flicker of relief. She had new ultrasound photos in her purse. She needed someone to witness this joy. She sat with Grace for over an hour. She smiled, laughed, held her hand, and whispered everything she'd been holding in. The sun had warmed the window seat, and pregnancy exhaustion had started to weigh Amara down. She leaned against the glass. The light, the quiet, the warmth. She told herself she'd close her eyes for just a minute. In her dream, Amara and Dohwan were walking through a field of sun-kissed grass, the baby nestled safely inside her. The temperature was perfect. Cool in the breeze, warm on her skin. The sky was streaked in violet, pink and gold, the clouds cotton wool soft. She felt the baby kick. Amara smiled. She could hear Dohwan's voice, his warm baritone. The baby kicked again. Her subconscious registered joy at his nearness. She reached for the nearest hand and laced her fingers through it, instinctively guiding it to her belly. She whispered, "Feel him." The man gasped. His palm cupped her gently, and she felt herself melt into him. His warmth surrounded her, protective, anchoring. Her body, tense just moments before, softened. He pulled her closer. Amara turned her face into his chest and inhaled. It was almost his scent. Not quite. But in the dream it didn't matter. "Don't let go," she whispered. The hand didn't. She woke slowly, her brain foggy. Something was off. Her body was still pressed against someone. Large, firm, unmoving. A man. Still holding her hand. Her pulse quickened. She shifted slightly, and the body shifted with her, held her tighter. The room was pitch dark now, except for the glow from the machines connected to Grace. Even the bedside lamp was off. Panic crept in. This wasn't Dohwan. The frame was too big, the arms too heavy. The scent, wrong. Amara jerked away, heart thudding. The hand didn't let go. She froze, mouth dry, muscles tense. Should she scream? Her eyes scanned the dark, and then, by the edge of the bed, she saw them. Shoes. Familiar ones, the exact pair she remembered seeing on the polished feet of Grace's husband. This wasn't a dream anymore. And though he wasn't Dohwan, the man held her as if he knew her. Amara's heart rate rose. Her breathing was harder now, and she was trembling. The baby kicked, hard. Jaemin's hand registered the kick and gently began to rub Amara's belly. Another kick, and that one caused Amara to gasp in pain. It was that noise that woke the sleeping man to full alert. "Are you all right?" the silhouetted man with the baritone voice said. He also registered that he was holding Amara's belly and relaxed his grip. At that moment, Amara pushed herself completely off the man, removing her hand from his. "Who are you?" she said in a frightened voice. Amara could just about make out the man reaching out for something behind his head. Just then the light came on. Amara squinted, her eyes not ready to take in this new level of illumination. "Who are you?" Amara demanded, still fearful but trying her best not to show it. Jaemin's hands went up into the air, as a way of letting Amara know he meant no harm. "I'm Grace's husband," the baby kicked. Amara's eyes were wide with surprise. Her pregnancy brain could not register what the gentleman revealed. "You're who?" Amara spat back. "Amara, I am married to Grace. I am her husband," Jaemin said slowly, deliberately. Amara looked at Grace, then back to Jaemin, and back to Grace again. The shoes. The shoes were the same she'd seen many times. Why wasn't he Dohwan? How is he Grace's husband? And then it hit her. She'd slept in Jaemin's arms. Amara was mortified. She couldn't believe that she'd done that. Amara apologized profusely, to Grace and to Jaemin. She was barely able to put on her shoes when she bolted for the door. Jaemin leapt to his feet. He tried to call for her, but she was moving faster than any pregnant woman should. Jaemin noticed Amara had left her bag. It was the excuse he'd need to approach her. Disarm her, possibly. He hadn't meant to frighten her. This was his fault. Though she'd been in the space where he normally rested when he visits Grace. Jaemin and Amara's first encounter was unorthodox, happened accidentally. When he went to settle on the couch, he heard the soft breathing of someone clearly asleep in that part of the room. Thinking it was a nurse shrugging off her responsibilities, he turned on the small light to find Amara partially sitting upright, sound asleep. One hand rested on her belly and the other on the couch. He isn't sure how long he stood watching her. He studied her closer now. She looked so young, so innocent under the soft glow of the lamplight, for lack of a better word. The hand that rested on her belly clutched at her stomach, and she gave a small moan. She shifted her weight just a bit. He assumed to find comfort. Jaemin took off his suit jacket and slowly eased himself down onto the couch. Amara's baby bump barely registered beneath her clothing, and Jaemin wondered if it was real, or was she pretending like Grace had. Another moan. Maybe something Amara was trying to say in her sleep. Jaemin reached out just to feel Amara's belly, and then something happened. Amara had grabbed his hand and placed it on her tummy. And then he felt it. A small nudge under the weight of his palm. He'd never felt anything like that before, and it startled him. Was this real? Can you fake a baby's movement? And then it happened again, and this time Amara's grip on his hand tightened just a little. She let out another moan. She wiggled beneath him like she was in search of comfort. Her head squarely in his chest. She was positioned in his arms, something he hadn't felt in months. It was something he dreamed he would experience with his wife, and now it was something he'd share with a stranger. Tears stung Amara's eyes. She was so embarrassed. She rushed past the nurse's station and down the ramp to the elevators. She'd rushed past a man she had seen somewhere before, but not registering at the time. Tears were blurring her line of vision. Her only thoughts were to get out of the hospital. As Jaemin rushed towards the elevator, he too noticed the man. The same man who watched Amara from afar on a previous visit. The man stood next to Amara. He was studying her so intently he hadn't noticed Jaemin walking up to the pair until Jaemin was positioned in between Amara and the man. Amara, Jaemin said gently, "Can I talk with you?" "I won't take but a moment." Amara was too ashamed to look at Jaemin. Instead, she focused her attention to the floor. The elevator doors opened, and the man next to Amara and Jaemin didn't move. Amara stepped in, and the man also walked into the elevator. Jaemin, seeing this synchronicity, didn't like it. "I have your bag," Jaemin said, and reached in and pulled Amara out of the elevator, and Jaemin looked the man squarely in the eyes. The man returned the gaze in kind. Neither blinked, and then the elevator doors closed. Jaemin made a mental note to ask his assistant look into who this strange guy was. There was something in the way that the man watched Amara that put Jaemin on alert. "Amara," Jaemin began, "I am sorry if I scared you." "Please let me apologize. I was inappropriate with you." Amara looked up and studied Jaemin's face. Jaemin registered Amara, searching his face for signs of sincerity. Tears were slowly falling down her cheeks, and all he wanted to do at that moment was comfort her. "If we can sit for just a moment, I can explain." Amara, unsure of what to do, agreed to go somewhere to talk. Jaemin suggested a nearby cafe setting that the place would likely be quieter than the hospital cafeteria. Amara agreed, and the two left the building. A few blocks later, the two were talking over hot drinks. Amara had since stopped crying, which made Jaemin feel less of a creep. He'd explained that he recognized her resting, and at some point she seemed in distress the way she grabbed her stomach, and at some point she grabbed his hand and wouldn't let go. These things were true, and slowly Amara recalled her dream. Jaemin could see Amara's angst dissipate. Her embarrassment took on a whole new meaning, but now she was more chatty, said that her dreams felt so real, and then she apologized for holding his hand hostage. Just like that, everything was settling into place. They talked for 2 hours. Neither noticed the time pass. The cafe staff alerted them that the cafe was about to close. Amara had only eaten a small biscuit and drank tea. Baby was hungry now. For sure it was time to go. "It was nice talking with you," Jaemin stated. "Would it be okay if we did this again?" Amara's eyes widened. "Excuse me," she said. "I mean this. Coffee and tea." Jaemin gave a disarming smile. "The nursing staff tells me that you regularly visit my Jaemin stopped himself. "Grace," he exhaled. "They say Grace's brain activity seems to spike when you visit. I think that's a good sign. If I can repay you with tea and scones or a cupcake." His smile met his ears, the small dimple on his left cheek now visible. "It's really not necessary," Amara confessed, but she didn't let on how much she enjoyed their communication tonight. Jaemin mentioned that he liked hearing about her pregnancy journey, and that made Amara feel good in a way. Of course she'd love to share that information with Do-hwan, but now Amara didn't know what to do or where to begin to find him so that she could tell him about the baby. "Okay," Amara smiled in return. "Only when you have the time." With that, the two left the cafe. Jaemin called a car service for Amara. He didn't trust that the man was really gone. Jaemin was right. The man was nearby. He watched the pair walk to the Cornerstone Cafe. He stood for 2 hours in the breezy, cold night air, only to see a car pick up Amara. As Jaemin walked back to the hospital, he made another call. Let his person know that the stranger had watched the two talk in the cafe. Jaemin wasn't sure what the problem was. It was clear that the guy was a stranger to Amara. She didn't recognize him, or maybe she was just oblivious. But 2 hours the stranger stood waiting in the cold. It didn't make sense to Jaemin. Was Amara in danger? Over the next several days, Amara's visits to Grace's hospital room became more frequent, and so did Jaemin's attention to them. Unbeknownst to Amara, Jaemin had been reviewing the video surveillance footage from Grace's room, a precaution he'd taken in his growing distrust of everyone in his wife's life, including himself. But it was during these quiet, slow evenings that Jaemin began to watch Amara, not just observe her. She was so unlike Grace, gentle, expressive, open-hearted. There was no calculation in her tone, no manipulation in her voice. When Amara would speak to Grace, it was one-sided and yet deeply comforting. She'd speak about her baby's development, the odd cravings, the joys and fears of each new month. Jaemin watched the footage and caught himself smiling more than once. His guilt for being moved by this stranger pressed heavily on his chest. Then one evening, the screen showed something unexpected. Julian Bakar entering Grace's room. The sight of him made Jaemin stiffen in his chair. Julian, the European fashion editor, who'd had a long, inappropriate and unrepentant affair with Grace, strolled into the room like he belonged there. On the monitor, Jaemin saw Julian toss a bouquet of exotic flowers onto the side table with disinterest. "Still sick?" Julian muttered with a sneer, inspecting Grace like she was merchandise past expiration. Jaemin's fist struck the desk so hard the camera feed shook. His voice trembled with quiet fury as he grabbed his phone. "We need to take care of something," he said darkly to his assistant. But before the call ended, Amara entered the frame. "Excuse me," she said, cautiously approaching Julian. "I don't think we've met." She extended a hand. Julian sneezed in her direction and didn't bother to cover his mouth. "No, there's no way we would have ever crossed paths." Amara raised an eyebrow. "You're right, because they have manners where I'm from." Jaemin leaned into the monitor. Julian turned abruptly, almost as if he might strike her. Amara didn't flinch. "Whatever it is you think you're going to do or say to me," she said, her voice steady, "I advise you to think again." Julian stepped closer. They were toe-to-toe now. "You're a bold one," he said. He sneezed again, this time turning his head. "If you're sick, you shouldn't be here," Amara snapped. "She just got off the ventilator. You don't want to contaminate her." "Why?" Julian mocked. "It's not like she can get any sicker." "You're as stupid as you look," Amara hissed. "If you had any respect for your friend, you'd leave." Julian scoffed, flicking his hand dismissively. "Don't worry, I won't be back. There's nothing here for me anymore." He left. Amara, expression tight, grabbed the bouquet he'd left and walked off camera. When she returned, her hands were empty. Jaemin's eyes hadn't moved from the screen. He played it back again and again. Something had shifted inside him. This woman, Amara, was no longer just a visitor. She was no longer just a girl his wife disliked. She had protected Grace, stood her ground. She was real. And now Jaemin found himself wondering what exactly it meant that she made the room feel less heavy, even in his wife's absence. He didn't know it yet, but he was beginning to feel something dangerous. He was beginning to feel safe. With her, the end of things. Amara hadn't set foot in the hospital in nearly 2 weeks. She'd been sick. Violently, viscerally sick. The kind of sick that clung to the walls of her lungs and refused to let go. Her hybrid class spared her the walk of shame into lecture halls, and her professor, thankfully, extended grace. Her only outing had been between the couch and the bathroom, coughing up what felt like parts of her soul. Dang Julian. She cursed his name every time her chest burned or her body shook. That man had infected her with more than contempt. Her neighbor brought broth, tea. It helped, but nothing could help the weight in her chest, the kind that had nothing to do with mucus or fever. On the first morning, her body didn't rebel against itself. Amara dressed, slowly, robotically. She rode the bus like a ghost, the city passing by without imprinting, and when she arrived at the hospital, her steps followed muscle memory more than will. Her body walked her up the familiar ramp, past the same walls, the same windows, and to the nurse's station, where a familiar face lifted in startled recognition. "Oh, you're here," the nurse said softly. "There's something for you." A small potted succulent was pulled from behind the desk, along with a folded envelope with her name scrawled in elegant handwriting. Before Amara could ask what this was, why, she caught the nurse's solemn eyes. The woman's mouth moved slowly, painfully. "She's gone, Amara. Grace. Passed away last week." Amara froze. Something inside her tipped over, shattered. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself against the cool wall. Her breath caught in her throat like glass. The nurse kept talking, something about pneumonia, something about her body being too fragile, but Amara didn't hear most of it. Her mind screamed one name: Julian. Tears erupted hot and fast, the kind that stole her breath. The baby inside her kicked, as if feeling the storm surge inside her chest. She cradled her belly and let herself sink to the floor, curling into the corner like someone trying to fold into non-existence. No one disturbed her. Not yet. When the haze lifted just enough, she stood and wandered downward, not thinking, not seeing, just drifting through the building like a ghost in search of something familiar. Instead, she walked headfirst into the funeral annex. She'd been here before, delivering wreaths with co-workers, but this time it wasn't business. Something in the air felt different, heavier. She spotted an older woman wearing a funeral hanbok in cream and indigo. Amara blinked. Recognition was slow to dawn. She quickened her pace. "Mrs. Park," she called gently, breathlessly. Mrs. Park turned. Her face was haggard, bruised by grief. Her eyes were red and sunken, rimmed with exhaustion Amara had never seen on her. She didn't speak, only nodded faintly, as if Amara was a whisper she barely heard. "I'm so sorry to bother you," Amara continued. I've been trying to reach your son. He won't respond to my messages. Please, if you could just tell him to call me. It's important." Mr. Park stepped beside his wife, a silent pillar of weariness. "I don't want to intrude. A crack exploded against her cheek before she saw it coming. The force of it sent her stumbling back a step. Gasps erupted behind her. Amara cupped her face, her palm cradling the sharp sting. Her eyes were wide, not in rage, but disbelief. Her lips trembled. "Why?" she whispered. Mrs. Park said nothing. She turned and walked away, back toward the main funeral hall. "What the hell?" Amara muttered, and began following her, fury and confusion swirling in her chest like acid. Her steps were uneven. Her breath was ragged. Mrs. Park spun back around like a cyclone, her voice erupting in a torrent of unintelligible, grief-stricken rage. She screamed at Amara in Korean, fast, sharp, vicious syllables that pierced the air like daggers. Amara flinched, unsure of what she was even being accused of, but just as Mrs. Park raised her hand again, Amara's eyes locked onto something in the room behind her, a large frame atop an altar, surrounded by white lilies, chrysanthemums, and ribbons of gold and black. A photo. A portrait. Do-hwan. No. "Who is that?" Amara asked, her voice hollow, trembling. Mrs. Park's second slap landed, but Amara didn't register it. Her gaze was locked. "What is that?" she said louder now, panic rising like bile. Conversations in the reception hall faltered. Heads turned. "What is this?" Amara screamed. She staggered into the hall, eyes wide, breath coming in shallow gasps. Her trembling fingers reached toward the altar. "No, no, no, no!" Her legs buckled. Mr. Park caught her by the shoulders and turned her to face him. His mouth moved. He was saying something, but she couldn't hear him. All she could hear was that screaming. Someone screaming, and she didn't realize it was her own Adsason. Mrs. Park shouted back. Her grief sharpened into something cruel, wild, primal. She surged forward, her hand ready to strike again, but Amara instinctively shielded her belly. Mr. Park saw it. His hand caught his wife's wrist mid-swing. "Don't," he said. That one word silenced her, and then Amara folded. Pain, deep and electrifying, shot through her stomach, a sudden bolt of lightning across her lower abdomen. Her legs crumpled beneath her. She dropped to her knees, gasping, her hands cradling her belly. "Amara!" someone shouted. Jaemin, finally breaking through the crowd. He'd seen it all from across the room, but his path had been blocked by frozen onlookers. She was whispering something. "The baby. Please not now. Please not here." Another wave of pain, and then a wave of silence, as if her body retreated to preserve her from what her mind couldn't hold. Somewhere in the room, a man lingered near the doorway. Matteo, still as a shadow. He had followed her here without her noticing. Jaemin clocked him now, the same man from the hospital corridors. His eyes were locked on Amara, not with malice, but with something else, something unreadable. Protective, maybe. Obsessive, maybe. Jaemin couldn't tell, but it sent a ripple of unease through him. The baby, the funeral, the mother, the stranger. Amara collapsed forward, the world narrowing to a tunnel of white sound. She saw De Juan's face in the frame again, blurry now through tears. Then, blessed darkness. The days following the funeral unraveled like loose thread from the hem of a fraying garment. No one quite knew what to say about what had happened. People whispered about the girl who'd been slapped, the one who collapsed at the foot of the altar. Some said she was De Juan's secret. Others called her his mistake. But Matteo never left. He was there when the hospital wheeled Amara away, unconscious and breath shallow, her hands instinctively cradling the small bump of her belly. He'd watched from behind a marble pillar near the corridor, watched Jaemin bark orders at a nurse, watched the older man who looked like De Juan cradle his wife, Mrs. Park, who by then had completely broken down, collapsing under the weight of her own grief. Matteo didn't approach. Not yet. He didn't know what he would say if he did. Would he introduce himself? "Hi, I'm the guy your dead son kissed during a surveillance mission. I'm the one he confided in. The one who made him laugh again. The one who wasn't supposed to matter." Instead, Matteo lingered. He stood in the edges of hallways, behind glass doors, in the corners of crowded spaces, always close enough to see, never close enough to be seen. When Amara was transferred to a recovery room, Jaemin was the one who sat by her bedside. Not Grace, not De Juan. Grace was gone. De Juan was dead. The world had rearranged itself, violently, without consent. Matteo slipped into the hospital room one evening, hours after visiting hours were over. The lights were dim. Machines hummed their lullabies. Amara lay unconscious, her face pale and peaceful, a tear-stained pillow beneath her. He stood at the foot of her bed, unmoving. There was something reverent in the way he looked at her. Guilt, jealousy, aching sorrow. He didn't touch her. He didn't dare. But he stayed, and he kept staying. He watched Jaemin too. The man's shoulders bore the exhaustion of someone who hadn't rested in months, his jaw locked, with too many words swallowed. Matteo noticed the way Jaemin touched the armrest of Amara's chair when he stood, how his eyes lingered on her sleeping form a second too long before walking away. Matteo saw it all. He kept notes in his head. When the nurses changed shifts, how long Jaemin stayed each night, the way Amara's fingers twitched when she dreamed. A part of him knew this was unhealthy. Another part of him didn't care. His anger owed her that much. For trying to steal De Juan, for starting a family, it was only fair that Amara suffered in public what Matteo had only ever suffered in secret. And still Matteo couldn't leave. Not yet. Several days later, Amara was being chaperoned back to her apartment by Jaemin. She told him she was fine, that she could manage, but he wasn't taking no for an answer. He had cleared his schedule entirely. For her. Amara's building was nicer than he expected. Luxury, with sleek modern touches, and security that whispered quiet wealth. He hadn't imagined someone on a florist's salary could afford this. Still dressed in the same clothes from the other day, Amara looked more like someone clinging to survival than someone living in luxury. When they exited the elevator, care packages lined her doorstep like a silent vigil. Jaemin noticed her neighbor Miss Kim's frequent visits, likely the only real support Amara had lately. At the door, Amara insisted he didn't need to come inside. He countered. If she needed anything done, he'd handle it. If she needed to rest, he'd make sure no one disturbed her. He didn't like the idea of her showering alone, not until Miss Kim confirmed she could stay the night. Amara sighed but relented. The apartment surprised him. Warm, artistically arranged. Everything from the strategic plant placement to the soft lighting felt intentional, like Amara had created a sanctuary for herself inside the chaos. "I mean it," she said, heading to the bathroom. "Don't touch a thing. Just sit." The shower was salvation. Her body ached. Her skin still bore the ghost of Mrs. Park's slap, but the water dulled the sting. When she emerged, wearing nothing but a t-shirt and soft cotton shorts, the scent of Korean dishes filled the air, comforting and familiar. The baby stirred. Amara waddled into the living room, drawn by the aroma, and the quiet presence of Jaemin setting the table. He glanced up, caught somewhere between restraint and tenderness. "I didn't know what you'd want, so I ordered a few things," he murmured. He'd been right. Her stomach rumbled in agreement. She lit a few candles, dimmed the lights, turned on a soft playlist, something ambient that cloaked the space in a low pulsing warmth. They sat across from each other, surrounded by flickering shadows and quiet music. Neither spoke much, until Amara, without thinking, reached over and placed a piece of meat onto Jaemin's rice. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" His baritone voice rolled through the room like velvet. She smiled, eyes lowered. "For enduring, for being here. You didn't have to." "I don't mind," he said, watching her with a gaze that lingered, sincere, unflinching. "I want to be." Her heart skipped. She could feel the heat in her cheeks, the weight of the air tightening between them. She wanted to cross the table and hold him, but didn't. She wasn't sure who was saving who anymore. Then, baby kicked. Amara smiled to herself, hand instinctively moving to her belly. Another kick. This one stronger, a ripple of life beneath her skin. She stood, walked slowly over to where Jaemin sat, and said softly, "Baby's awake." He looked at her, uncertain. Her voice had changed, tender, playful. "Here," she said, guiding his hand beneath hers, settling it just above her navel. "Right here." His fingers were large, steady, and slightly cold. She laced hers over his, holding him in place. They were almost eye to eye now. Her breath mingled with his. "Don't make me out to be a liar," she whispered with a faint laugh. Then the baby kicked again, right beneath Jaemin's hand. He blinked. "Uncle Jaemin," she teased. His brow lifted. The baby kicked again, as if in response to his name. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. That's it," she murmured. "Baby likes your voice." The child responded again. The sensation visibly startled Jaemin, but he didn't pull away. His hand stayed. Her fingers stayed over his. Something sacred passed between them. A moment too complex for words. A future that would never be, imagined just long enough to ache. And Amara, feeling that ache, needing something she couldn't name, reached for him. Slowly, arms rising to wrap around his neck. She pulled him into her, felt the warmth of his breath against her collarbone. He didn't resist. One hand rested on her back, the other on her belly. His head dipped into the crook of her shoulder, and for a heartbeat they simply stood, wrapped in candlelight and heartbeat and breath. Her fingers moved gently along the nape of his neck, drawing lazy lines, coaxing tension from his body. The baby kicked again. Jaemin felt it this time against his torso, and still, he didn't move. Unaware of when it happened, Jaemin had pulled Amara fully into him, his body engulfing her entirely. She didn't want to let go. Neither did he. The music played on, wrapping around them like a lover's hum, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. It wasn't until the knock at her door shattered the trance, they slowly, reluctantly, let each other go. I hope you enjoyed episode 4 of Love Lessons. Before you go, here are a few questions for you. Question 1. Why do you think Grace responds to Amara's voice? Question 2. Is forgiveness something we give others or ourselves? Question 3. Is it wrong to form a bond when no one intended it to happen? And question 4. If the truth would break you, would you still want the answers? Thanks for watching, and as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.